a great article written by Bill Hybels. He talks about a number of the challenges to self-leadership that surprised him. And he starts out with kind of an analogy. He asks the question, imagine leadership as a compass. And which direction, when you typically think of leading, most of your time and energy, which direction would you be leading? You have people around you.
Leading the people that would be placed under you.
Okay.
If you're a leader, you've got people underneath you is
Okay.
what I remember from
Yeah.
and what I think of. Yeah.
So he calls that south. But he was really challenged by an article by Dee Hock, who I think is the founder of the Visa Card Network, and that said, as a leader, we need to focus 50% of our emotional energy on self-leadership, and the other 50% equally around the compass, leading up, leading east and west to the side, and then leading those that are entrusted to our charge. And Bill's comment was that he totally disagreed with that. So he had to take a step back and put the article aside for a while and think about it. And you know, he's not a stupid leader, so he was kind of trying to reflect on that. And then he talks about how he got to a point after 20 years in leadership where he just burned out. And he realized there was a lot more truth to this than he thought about. I've been in, kind of Christian leadership full-time on staff for 27 years and probably another 2 or 3 years actively as a student before joining staff. And I would say, having hit right on the edge of that, just a little too much, a little too long, a little too hard, I'd agree in many ways with Bill and his assessment. Whether it's exactly 50% or not isn't the point. The point is that it's critical for self-leadership. And the example he uses, I love, is David's really hard, very bad day. Do you remember when David went out to war? He wasn't king yet, and they were running around and trying to stay alive and hide from Saul and all this stuff. And they go out to battle, they come back, and all the women and children are gone, and everything's burning. And all of his men, his trusted, loyal 400 men, have this great idea: we want to kill you because it's your fault that all this is gone. So, how worse could it get? And in 1 Samuel 30, it says, "And David went and strengthened himself in the Lord." That's a really powerful verse for us. I was just talking with a couple of these guys. They travel a lot. I don't know how many of you travel a lot, but whether you travel a lot or you don't, whether you have a lot of people under you expecting things, or whether you're under someone else who is expecting a lot from you, or if you're both, you're under someone who's expecting a lot and you're leading other people who are expecting a lot from you, it's very possible to get drained. And so in the last couple of years, I had a great opportunity as part of a graduate degree program to do some interviews with our top leaders around the world. And I interviewed 20 of our top leaders that are in area level positions or global positions, including Steve and Judy Douglas. And I asked them 5 questions and just let them talk. And one of the questions was, I want you to think about 2 or 3 leader failures that you have seen in our organization at the top level. And I'm not going to ask you the story of what happened, but whatever the symptoms were that presented themselves, what do you think the root causes were? And I think if you've been in Orlando, if you've been paying attention the last week or two to the news, you know that there's been a pretty high-profile leader failure here. I was actually speaking last week in Eastern Europe, in Hungary, to a staff on this topic the day I found out of what happened here in town. And so it's very visceral, this whole thing. And so I want to ask you if you've seen either up close, even in your own family situation, in a church situation, or even in our organization, people who have failed in their leadership. What do you think some of the root causes were that you observed? I'd just like to turn it in tables, let you discuss at your table for a couple minutes. We'll come back and hear what you had to say. Hey, you've actually hit the top 2 answers from our leaders around the world in order of what they said. Number 1 was isolation, that people get isolated. And it's not like as busy leaders, anybody consider themselves isolated. Because we're surrounded by people. The inbox is full every day with more stuff than we can possibly respond to. People are coming and either we're in the office and getting distracted, or we're sitting at Starbucks trying to not be distracted, or you're on a plane surrounded by people that you don't know. But the reality is you get isolated, even in those environments, from the real issues that might, like you said, there's secrecy. And so, the antidote, as we talked through a lot of this, and as you look at Scripture, is having a very small, trusted group of people, probably in the 2 to 5 number. And I have found through the years, I've had some awesome teams. In fact, I've only had a couple of years that were really what I'd call really bad team years. And, to be in ministry for 3 decades and have 2 or 3 really bad teams is fantastic, actually. But even on those teams, because we're a movement and people are coming and going, a lot of times it could be 6 months before people know me well enough to press in on an issue and go, okay, is that just personality, or is that sin, or what is that? And especially if I'm the team leader, they may not have the courage or feel the permission to do that. Even if I'm not the team leader, just because I've been there and I seem to know what I'm talking about, and I can put up a good front. And so, or maybe we're focused on business during a staff meeting and it's hectic and there's 6 or 8 people in the room, and maybe that's not the place to talk about something. So, to not be isolated, I've realized I have to intentionally invite people and create spaces where they can say the things that they want to say to me and observe the things in my life, which deals with the pride issue, which is the second most reported thing of leaders and why they don't make it. And pride comes out as in different ways. Narcissism, which is I'm the center of the universe, and my job as a leader is to align you to the proper way, which is my way of seeing things. Or if you confront me, there's always good rationale, either that it's not really like that, or the reason it's like that is because it's someone else's fault. So the ownership of that is always somewhere else besides right here. And I don't know if you know who Mark Rutter is. He's the U.S. LDHR leader, and he's been doing research for the last 15 years on leaders who failed in the U.S. and doing his doctoral research on that. And so he's identified kind of leaders at risk, and narcissism is one of them. People who don't accept authority, not necessarily anti-authority, but they float. They're squishy. They move out of the way of when someone wants to come in and appropriately address things in their lives or ask them. Other people are maybe the codependent type without boundaries that can't say no. They can't say no to ministry demands, so they get caught up in always meeting everyone else's needs, and they're not protecting their own heart and their own self. And so they're constantly busy, and more of these people probably are rather than a narcissist who self-destructs, these are people who just burn out because they're always on someone else's calendar, and they don't take time to nourish their own soul. If you've taken a flight recently, you get numbed to the entry, the safety briefing, right? But something that always gets me at the end of that is when the oxygen mask drops. What do they tell you to do? Put it on yourself and then help other people. And I always thought that's so selfish. If I got kids, I got to get them on their face. But it makes sense. In a crisis, if there's smoke, if I'm alert, I may have 30 seconds before I run out of oxygen and I'm even capable of helping someone else. And in spiritual ministry that we do, that's really the case. We've got to be filled with the Spirit, abiding in Christ, having the sap of Christ flowing through us each and every day, or we got nothing. We got nothing to give. It doesn't matter whether you're in accounting or field ministry or traveling around with the Jesus Film or executive leadership, you got nothing. So that's really, really important. And the busier I get, the more I've realized I need to carve out that space for Christ. Mark 1, when people were looking for him, he wasn't available. Where is that space in your life where my kids are looking for me, my wife's looking for me, my team's looking for me, my boss is looking for me, but I'm not available? I've actually been pretty good at that. What I have not been as good at is my tribe's looking for me on social media, and gosh, it's early, but I'll just check once here, and then mentally I get distracted and I get caught up rather than the best moments being the Lord's. So one of the things that I've tried to do with my teams is ask them, when is your best time of the day? I'm a morning guy. My best creative focus time is 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. And after that, it's like, okay, then I can meet with people and do stuff, but in terms of meeting with the Lord or being creative, creating things, it's going to be pretty much before 10 a.m. My sister, who's also on staff and has served overseas and now is in Austin, but her best time is probably 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., or it used to be. I think with 2 teenage kids now, it's shifted back a little bit, but that's her best creative time, connecting with the Lord. I've worked with guys on teams in Asia that were both. And so ensuring that I'm not trying to inflict what my schedule looks like on you, and likewise not trying to necessarily model exactly when you're doing what, but finding that time for me and guarding it. Proverbs 4:23 says, guard your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. And what are you doing? What am I doing to guard that? And then appropriately let those 2 to 5 people into that heart level. That they really know what I'm thinking. Hey, I was on this trip and I got tempted in this situation and I was scared. Would you pray with me about that? Well, if I'm, like we were talking about here, if I'm constantly worried about maintaining an image, that's even hard to share that. But I've got to have a group of guys. I do. We meet Monday mornings downtown. One guy's a president of another ministry. Another guy's a CEO of a secular construction firm. And it's really good because none of us report to each other. So we can actually listen and speak directly in each other's life without any fear of that's going to affect my paycheck or my life or my assignments or, Not that we're typically afraid of that. Probably 80% of that we'd be willing to talk about, but sometimes it's that last little stuff that we're unwilling. But these 2 guys, and it's better than just having one person, because one guy will really challenge a perspective that I have on something, and we can get kind of face off. Well, here's why I think I should relate to Steve in this way or this such and such. And he'll challenge me on it. But sometimes when 2 people challenge it, I know, God, there's some truth resonating here. And they don't even see eye to eye on the reasons, but the fact that they're stopping me causes me to stop. It addresses that second issue of pride. It causes me to be humble, to receive what someone else is saying, like James says in his book, and to really take stock and be willing to listen and to not think my first dispositional thought is that I'm right in this situation. I think that's the nature of all pride. I've got the right perspective here because I had time with the Lord in the Word. I asked to be filled with the Spirit, therefore I'm right. But that equation does not always logically follow. And when we live in community, to allow the community to speak in, and especially as a leader, especially if you have a titled position over others, leading means going first and modeling. And so I've got to be with my team and say, I'm going to be facilitating these meetings this year, and I need you, and I'm inviting you live when it comes up or in the coffee breaks in between, to challenge me and to say, Ken, why did you say that way? Or you amped up a little too much on this one person. I think you may have hurt her feelings or whatever it is. But I've got to invite that from my team for feedback. And if that environment isn't there, then I've shut myself off from one of the best sources to deal with the top two reasons why leaders get isolated and prideful, is the people that see me interacting every single day. So that's really important. The third reason of why people fail after isolation and pride was a loss of passion for Christ. And so, whatever it is for you that keeps that first love burning bright, some people like very disciplined things. Some people, we need to be in the Word because that fuels passion. Faith comes from hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. That fuels faith. We've got to be worshiping. I need variety. I'm very disciplined, but I need variety. So it's kind of an interesting mix. So I'm going to have the same kind of time, space each day. One of the things that's been helpful to me, I heard early in my maybe my first or second year as a local campus leader 25 years ago, was be on a regular practice of reading cover to cover through the Scriptures. And so I have made it a practice and habit every other year to read all the way through. And sometimes it's on a 1-year plan, sometimes it's on a 4-month plan, but just constantly going through the whole thing. And there's just something that the Spirit can do when we're in the Word, and we see the heroes of Scripture, we see the humanness of them and how they fall, and we want to be like them in their best moments, and we want to avoid the pitfalls that caught them. And that's just helpful. So this is obvious stuff. I mean, it's basic, but when it comes to self-leadership. Another thing is that I have noticed in our organization that, and I think this is true of any group, any team you're working on, that things move pretty fast. And we're expected to do a lot, expected to be responsive. And so in terms of people will always ask me about results and about response. Like, why didn't you call me back? Or I'll feel that they're going to ask that. Did you get my email? Yeah, yours and 200 others, and I'm trying to sort through them. So you need a system to deal with that and time. And I've found that 2 afternoons, 3 afternoons a week, setting aside 90 minutes of just response, pure response time. If you're a professor at a college campus, it'd be called office hours, but most of us don't operate that way. So I'm not just trying to do it 5 minutes on the fly or just constantly live 18 hours a day where all I'm doing is nitpicking response, that I'm sitting down, looking at requests, and I'm able to kind of proportionalize and go, delete, file, refer, act on this, schedule that. I've been blessed to have a great assistant and assistants through the years who help me. Most of you probably don't. So you need a system that helps you do that as part of your leadership. I use a system from David Allen called Getting Things Done. It's a great book. I don't know if you've ever seen it or heard of it, but that's a great mental philosophy of just how to handle all the lint that piles up every day and discern what's important, what's a 30,000 foot level priority, what's a 10,000 foot level priority, and how, in light of all the different inboxes and devices and things that are coming at us, do you have a place in a system that makes sense of it all, that's realistic for you to live? Because otherwise your capacity for leadership will be limited by your inbox management or your relationship contact management of people. And we all have some limit, but we might have ways to get beyond what we assume is our limit. So people will ask you about responsiveness. They'll ask you about results. Did you get this project done? Did you see people won to Christ, built in their faith, sent on mission? Whatever your team is responsible. A new language translated. Did it get done on time and under budget? And if not, why? So there's a lot of that. Are you responsive? Are you generating results? There's 2 things people won't ask you about very often. One of them is rest. Are you resting? Are you resting in the Lord on a day-to-day basis, and are you actually resting weekly and on some kind of an annual rhythm that makes sense? Now, I am going to offer you free of charge, without changing any policies, 7.5 weeks of vacation a year today. And it's called a weekly Sabbath. It's 52 days off, completely off, where you're not in your inbox, on your device, doing any work at all. God's given it to us. And about 10 years ago, when I got to the edge of what Bill Hybel describes as burnout on this, in his article, Ann and I were getting some marriage counseling and dealing with this issue, and how it was, as she said, I just become a total grouch in our marriage. It was just nuclear fallout from ministry, the standard stuff we all have, but it was coming out at home, and it was spilling over onto my kids, who were in their young teens at the time. And so one of the surprising counsels from this counselor was, you need a Sabbath. You're like a type A personality, and this is just toxic for you. So God's given this to you, you need to take it. So I started what was kind of a 90-day, 3-month experiment, and I said, okay, I travel a lot. I can't always get a Sunday or a Saturday or whatever would be a normal time, but I'm going to aim for 24 hours a week where I take off my watch, and I don't even have it on. I turn off my cell phone, or I don't answer any calls that are ministry related. I'm not initiating anything, and I'm not doing any work-related email at all. Now, at that time, we were living overseas. We were in Singapore, and so Skyping home or talking to my parents or things like that, or taking care of personal stuff was fine, but no work-related email. That was not easy to do. Okay, I'll be honest with you. It's really not easy to do. But what I found is that I was able, after a couple of weeks of this, I really liked it. It gets addictive. There's a reason God asks us to do this and gives us this time. In Hebrews 4, it talks about Sabbath rest, and it says you have to strive to enter God's rest, which is a funny way to put that as a verse. Think about it. You have to strive to enter God's rest. And so kind of creating a little sacred space. And, when we were field staff on campus, especially in China, the weekends were the hottest times. It's when the students had off. It's when they would come to our apartments, when they'd sit around and they'd show up at 2 in the afternoon, they'd stay till 10 at night, and we're like, ugh. So weekends didn't work for Sabbathing. So I had to find another time. Now, the rhythm of how things work, actually, weekends are kind of better. So I typically Sabbath Saturday noon to Sunday noon, and that's when I try to not do any organizational work, no phone calls, no meetings, nothing. And that allows me to finish at church, in the Word, with the body. It didn't work for me to do all day Sunday, because things by Sunday afternoon and evening, my mind was starting to go to the next week, and I wanted to peek at the schedule, and was I going to have to prep something for a Monday morning meeting or not? And it felt a little too constraining. So doing that for me worked. I don't know what might work for you. But I tell you what, I hit Monday mornings excited, hungry, ready for the mission, rather than limping in, exhausted, yet another week, and can I make it to vacation? Can I make it to the end of the semester? Which is how I lived my first 10 years on staff, was limping into stuff. And so kind of using that. Tracy's a triathlete. I do a lot of long distance endurance biking, and you have to have recovery days. If you ride hard, and we go out and ride, Ann and I ride with a Saturday morning cycling group. We did 53 miles last Saturday, hard pace. Okay, guess what? I'm not riding hard Sunday. Your muscles have to rest, because you're breaking down the proteins, and if you ride too hard too long, you can overtrain, and it messes with all of your systems. It messes with your immunity system, messes with your digestive system. You actually gain weight when you're overtraining, which is weird. I did. It's crazy. Your body stops working like it's designed to work, because you're taxing it too hard, and so everything has to adjust to it. The same thing's true in our spiritual walk with our heart. If we overtax it, I start rationalizing why bad decisions seem good. I start rationalizing why Oreos are healthy food. You know, what's spiritual junk food, you know, for you. I start allowing things to satisfy my soul that were never designed to satisfy my soul. And that's part of self-leadership. We're all different in what our pulls are, what our idols are. But if I'm not ever recovering and kind of weaning myself off of the pace of life, I can't ever even see what those things are, right? So part of it's just that process. And again, inviting two to five people in, where a lot of times I can see your idols a lot easier than you can see mine. I can see my own. So, so I said people will ask you about results. They'll ask you about response. They won't ask you about your rest. So you kind of got to fight for that. Did you know we have a policy about sabbaticals? That after you've been on staff 8 years, you get a full paid month off. It's not vacation time. It's actually a sabbatical. I tried to take that. I went in, I took one 3 years ago. And in the process, I was asking senior leaders in the organization, like on our executive global team and top leaders in other countries, I said, well, how did you do that? How did you take your sabbatical? Because you're busy and you've got expectations. And what I discovered was I didn't meet a senior leader that had taken a sabbatical, that had never used that policy, not a single one that I asked. So just telling you, there's an organizational bias against this. But I'm already counting down the 14 months remaining till I get my next sabbatical. And you know what happened? I didn't go to a single meeting, didn't answer a single email. Takes help. I was so restored in the Lord, and it was great because Ann was on our team, and she would go to all our team meetings, and she did not tell me anything that was going on. It was a very significant time of reorganization, and a lot of things were happening, a lot of moving pieces that she knew I'd want to know about, but she's like, I'm not going to freak him out. And you know what I found out is the world kept spinning for 30 days without me, without my finger twirling it. And it's just back to that humility thing. It's like, you know what? God is going to accomplish his purpose in the world with or without me, and it's great that I get to play a part, but it's not dependent on me, and it's not dependent on you. So just like running a 10K, you can't go out and do that your first time if you've never run a mile. You probably can't do a good sabbatical if you haven't done a few Sabbath days on weekends and gotten used to that rhythm. So start small, take a bite off, try it, build it in, see how it works for you. It's addicting in a good way. The other thing people probably won't ask you about very often, and I think we're getting better about this now that we've got kind of a personal focus, position focus sheet and PDP going, but in terms of taking time to refocus your priorities in your life. We have in our reimbursement structure kind of a way to, whether you're single or married, a planning week, a few planning weekends a year that we can do. Ann and I have done at least 2 per year, every year of our marriage and every year that we've been on staff, except for I think 1 year we only got 1. But I'm surprised at the number of people who don't take any. And whether you pay for it or not in reimbursement, that's not the point. But are you getting away? We do it typically, we look at the calendar of the last 6 months and kind of evaluate. Did we like what we committed to? You know, maybe I committed to lead the worship team at church in interim, or maybe she was doing this ministry, or we were on this project group and something with our responsibilities on our team. Did we like it or not? You know, would I choose to recommit to this the next 6 months or not? And that changes in seasons as kids grow and change, and especially for moms, there's probably changes more rapidly through seasons. As kids go to school or get involved in sports teams and you got to drive them around or whatever it is, you know, and then now we're empty nest for 2 years, so we have different conversations. But the point is, have the conversation. Look at the calendar. Would we invest money in what we're doing? Because our time is money. And it's emotional energy and it's heart energy that goes into this. And so if sometimes we realize the first time we did this, it's like, No one's holding a gun to our head. We don't have to recommit to this. You don't like it. I don't like it. The kids don't like it. Why are we doing this? Let's prune that out. And like, wow, we've got Tuesday nights back again. Okay. Or, well, we've committed and we don't want to renege on our commitment, but the commitment only goes 2 more months. So after, when we finish this, we're going to tie this off in a bow and try something different. So typically people aren't asking us those kind of questions, and we have to give self-leadership to that kind of stuff. So I'm going to stop there. I've just dumped out a lot of stuff and just see if there's any questions or thoughts, responses that you have.
Just a question about the organization.
Yeah.
How Cru, you mentioned the sabbatical policy and the kind of planning retreats.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that Cru's doing to help facilitate that kind of bit of rest and recuperation and I guess emotional health that's so necessary to go well long term?
Well, I think we've got it built in more than we take. Like even I very rarely I keep track of my travel nights away from home and my vacation days on an Excel sheet. It's really simple, just columns. And when I travel, I can tell you every place I've been in the last 10 years, and I rarely am able to use all my vacation days a year. And we've just started the last 5 years changing that. Like we get, however many weeks a year, not that we can always go, we can't necessarily afford to go somewhere and pay for that, but we can take it off. Like, are we even doing that? And that's all provided. Sabbaticals provided. I think it's fair to say a Sabbath a week is provided. And so my point is, I think Cru has provided what we need, but we don't take it. And that's the point of self-leadership. You've got to look at and go, I am going to take this. And sometimes that's going to disappoint some people. And so part of being healthy is being able to disappoint people appropriately. Funny looks, the first time I started realizing we were overseas, we had furloughs, right? So you get, so much, a month a year when you're overseas. We would come home every 2 years. And so in 2 months, we're trying to go to CSU, raise support, see all our family, see our friends, take the kids somewhere interesting in America and teach them about American life, and then go back. And it's like, where's the furlough part? Where's this rest part? I mean, if you've ever been on MPD trips, it's the same thing, because you're just going until you leave. And so I realized the best way for me to get furlough was not during furlough, but I took a reading week every 6 weeks. And I didn't have the sabbatical. It was just one of my vacation weeks. I was up to, I think, 3 or 4 weeks a year that I wasn't using 2 or 3 of. And so I would say, I'd check with my boss on my team and with my team and say, I'm going to take 2 months from now, I'm going to take this week. There's no meetings that's planned. So I won't be in the office. It's all 5 days off. And I would just select 5 or 10 books that I hadn't gotten to. And I just, delve into them, see if I want to, read the first few chapters, go, yeah, I want to read this whole book. And I just sit and read it that week. Or, no, I'm not going to read this, but now I know what it's about. Journal, reflect, and I needed that. I needed an island of refuge to be creative and to dream a little and just not be in the rhythm of things. What I discovered is that rather than being resisted, more and more people on my team started doing that too. And so they realized, well, who gave you permission to do that? It's like, me. And I talk to the appropriate people, but model it, live it out. That's why it's called self-leadership, right? Yeah. No one can do this stuff for you. If I came to you and said, you have to take a week off and go think about your PDS or your PDF or whatever, there'd probably be resistance. Well, I don't want to because I'm doing this, but if you initiate it, you own it differently. Other questions?
You mentioned the northeast, southwest, compass leadership, and I was curious. The article says good leaders have to lead north. Those who are over you, you can't just focus on those and trust it to your care. So I was curious if you could speak to your experience, what that actually looked like. It was something that when I read it, I was thinking, well, I haven't really thought about that. As far as what it looks
Do you have somebody you report to on staff, like a team leader or
yes.
somebody? Okay. How do you lead them? Okay. How are you building into their lives? How are you adding value to their day? How are you, as God puts ideas and dreams in your heart about how things could be done differently on your team, or maybe a creative opportunity that no one's seen yet that's not on the plan, how do you create some motivation, some energy, maybe some budget and people to do that? That's leading up. So Steve Douglas has been my boss for the last 6 years, and I have a formal meeting with him every quarter for 2 or 3 hours. And I always send him an agenda of, here's the 3 or 4 points I want to talk about. And I know you want to have some things too, but I'm putting them in front of him, and some of it's review or update. We also have, you know, I can call him anytime. He texts well. It's a great way to talk to him. I know he prayer walks on in the mornings. He leaves his house about 6 a.m. So when I was first in the role, my first couple of years and trying to get to understand it, I would actually text him and say, can I drive over and prayer walk with you this morning? And that would be a chance where he's walking anyway and picking up trash in his neighborhood, if you know how Steve does that. And we get 45 minutes, and I could share with him, hey, I've got these 2 things on my heart, and can we pray about it? Just trying to get to know him. I haven't done that recently, but you know, sometimes I want to bring him, I want to be ahead of him asking me how my strategy is going, what I'm responsible for. So I'm going to bring him information that I know he wants. He loves numbers, he loves data, he loves trends. So I'm going to talk to him about that. He loves a couple of stories. So as I get him on email, I just forward them to him. That's leading up. I'm giving him things I know he wants that help him give broader leadership to the organization without him asking me. If I want to launch a new strategy or I got a project, what I don't do is necessarily, if it's big, I don't want to just go do it and say I'll ask forgiveness later. You know, if it works, it's great. He loves that. But if it doesn't, it's not as good. But I'd rather say, hey, I'm thinking about this. I'd love to get some insight from you on it. That's not saying I want your permission. It's saying I want your insight. So I'm signaling to him this is at the formative stage. And a lot more important besides Steve, because he's very busy and he's very empowering. But even with my prior leader in Asia, I reported to a Singaporean who reported to a Korean who reported to an Indian. And so there was a lot of cultural stuff going on and what their expectations were of hierarchy. And so with that leader, with Chung Yuk in Singapore, I found it much more helpful. He didn't want as much email, but I could just drop in, be near his office, and get 5 to 10 minutes and say, hey, I want to share 2 things that are really exciting that just happened, and I need your insight on this issue. What do you think? And so I'm engaging him in what I'm doing. That does 2 things. It builds a lot of trust because there's never a sense that I'm trying to hide anything. It's like, you know, you've hired me to do this, and so I'm just engaging you, but I don't want to burden you because it's my responsibility. It's not your responsibility. So I'm going to make the hard decisions on it unless you feel the need to override. But I'm not going to set myself up asking you to override me. Because he will. He's a strong leader. If I say, gosh, I can't, if I'm indicating I can't decide this or this, would you do it? He will probably, you know, give a strong opinion. And then if I don't like his opinion, I've painted myself into a corner. Well, in most cases, in Chung Yuk's, I've worked with very empowering leaders in almost every setting in this organization, which has been great. They don't want to make those decisions for me. That's why they've asked me to make those decisions. So don't create a conversation that is black and white or paints myself into a corner. Invite, engage, thank. So those are good ways. Another thing is that, you know, in any situation with a leader, we may see 90% eye to eye on almost everything, and in Steve's, in my case, we do. But there's always that 10%. And so typically I like kind of confrontive engagement. I like that set of kind of debate, but not everybody leader likes that, and not all the time. It does drain energy. So I found that if I actually position myself as sitting on the same side of the table and say, hey, let's look at the Great Commission together. Let's look at this project together. What are the outcomes we really want? Here's my vantage point. What's your vantage point? That's a different conversation than a more confrontive thing on the last 10%. So that's a way to lead north. Okay, and then just asking, what's on your heart, leader? You're my leader. How can I be praying for you? Where is some pressure that you're carrying that if you could just offload a couple things, your life would be a lot easier? I may be able to take some stuff. I got some space here the next couple of weeks. You know, those, if I'm a leader, like, whoa, that's so nice. And it's not manipulative. I'm not talking about manipulating north. I'm talking about genuinely engaging and serving. And what I've found in our Dash-led environment, that we're trying to be more east-west and volunteer-led and flatten the organization, those exact same conversations with peers on my team or peers on a different team are very empowering too. Exact same thing. Hey, what are you guys working on? How can we engage? We're thinking about this. What do you think about it? How would that work with you? And sometimes it's like, wow, we've been thinking the same thing. In fact, we've already got a coder and a graphics designer, and we're halfway down the road on this project. It's like, literally yesterday, we abandoned a plan for a global SLM map because Global Church Movements already did it, and all we have to do is have different color icons. I mean, like, we were looking at this major project, and now it's like we just need to change. You have red, we'll use blue dots. It's conceptually that simple.
SLM.
Student-led movements. So, yeah, those are some specific ways I've found helpful, and that I like for those that are south of me to lead me. So a lot of times it goes back to the golden rule. How would you like to be treated as a leader for those, and then treat others that same way.